Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves in 1990. So here we are, Dances with Wolves, and here's the Blu-ray. Of course, a rewatch because I've seen this many times and watched it again tonight. And yeah, this is a very, very special film. I've hinted many times on my channel, about this film, but I've not actually properly really mentioned it fully, talked about it fully. But yeah, here it is. And yes, this is one of the films, once again, that's part of my favourite films reviews, that I'll be doing every day really at the moment. And of course, a very famous film, and more so now, unfortunately, it usually gets a lot of, you could say, hate, and mainly because, of course, famously, it got 7 Oscars, of course. 1991 Academy Awards, and of course, two of them were Best Picture, Best Director, and that film called Goodfellas, of course, released in the same year as Dance with Wolves. Scorsese lost out to Kevin Costner, and of course, people were very angry at this, and my take on it is as well, just in general, how can you really get angry at the Oscars? How can you attack other films just because they get the Oscars over other ones? Does it really, is it the end of the world kind of thing? It's just the Academy giving awards. The films they think deserve it, and it's not like saying it's whatever wins Best Picture or whatever is the best film. And some people, I just think in general people get too worked up about it. Because it's more important, over time, really, how people talk about the film and how they regard it. But yes, of course, that's what it's most famously for now. Of course, at the time, in production, it was getting nicknamed Kevin's Gate. People thought it was going to be another flop like Heaven's Gate by Cimino. And the Western really was dying out in many ways, up until this point, and certainly after Heaven's Gate, a lot of things changed. So as well, the fact that it was subtitled, and it was an epic. Many people, of course, unfortunately, don't like that sort of thing, and I've never ever not watched a film because it has subtitles. I think that's really just stupid to do that, and I don't really get that. But of course, it is unfortunately the case that a film to be commercially successful, that is one of the things that can affect a film, and it proved everyone wrong. It got amazing at the box office, and of course it swept the Oscars, 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Of course, Kevin Costner, his directorial debut, and what a debut it was. I'm not going to talk about too much now. How the fact Goodfellas and all that kind of thing, but I'll start with my kind of beginnings of the experience with this film. I watched it first when I was about 7 or 8, and it was one of them films that I watched a lot as a kid. Whenever I was off school, now and then this would be one of the films that I'd watch from start to finish, during the day. Other ones that joined this, The Untouchables, actually, with Kevin Costner, Gangs of New York, and quite a lot of other films like that, and Lord of the Rings as well. And yeah, no, this was one of them films, I absolutely loved it, and it's one of them films as well, especially even at a young age, you can kind of connect to, because it's visually is what the story really is told through, and you can get all the emotions and everything through that, even despite not knowing the kind of political stuff and everything like that, and the actual, all the messages that it's trying to say. And yes, I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favourite films. And then, for quite, at least 5 years, more than that, I never actually watched it, until last year. I rewatched it. As well, I was just thinking, I wanted to leave it time and just, kind of just try and forget loads of different things. So then when I rewatched it, it'd be even better experience. And then there was a couple of years where I actually just kind of thought, I'll get it next time. I'll get it, in a few months or something. Just kept putting it off, and I forgot. And then last year I thought, I've got to watch it now on Blu-ray. And I rewatched it, and yeah, it really just even better than I remembered. And it's one of them films that is just as good, if not better, than when I remembered, my child experience with this film. And yes, I will say it now, that this is for me far better than Goodfellas. I reviewed that film, of course, couple of days ago, and you know, I thought that was a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best films ever made. But this just happens to be better. You know, I think it's the best film of 1990, and you know, I've been doing this favourite films kind of thing recently. I'll say it now. This is for me, the best film that I've reviewed on this channel. Um, and you know, what better time to say it now? You know, this is not just in my top 10 films of all time. It's in my top 4 films of all time. That's how good it is. It's one of my absolute favourite films. It moves me beyond most films. I think it's one of the finest films ever made. You know, the craft, the passion, the heart, how spiritual it is, and the best Western of all time as well. Surpassing The Good, Bad and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, Django Unchained, Unforgiven, all these masterpieces. Even The Searchers, which of course this is, you know, it's got some similarities. You know, the way it's shot and everything, and the way the camera moves, and the kind of use of music and stuff at times. But yeah, you know, this film, you know, it made Kevin Costner, you know, absolutely, you know, worldwide. You know, he was already an actor before this, of course. You know, The Untouchables, I absolutely love him in that film. He produced this film, and of course, Michael Blake would work on the screenplay based off of his book, you know, a couple of years before. And yeah, you know, it's set in 1863, and basically, yeah, so the American Civil War, and yeah, basically, you know, that is shown at the beginning, that sort of stuff, the Civil War, and kind of the friction and everything, and yes, you know, it's got a stunning opening in 15 minutes, basically. Kevin Costner is losing hope, and, you know, in the cause and everything, and, you know, he attempted suicide, and, you know, because his boy doesn't want to get his leg amputated, just a loss of hope in general, I think, and then he gets, actually, for the attempted suicide, and what happened after that, which I won't ruin, it lands him with, you know, a promotion, basically, for his bravery, and then he gets reassigned, and he basically says he wants to go to the frontier, and you know, to see the last days of it, really, before it's gone. And Fort Sedgwick is where he arrives, and he goes on this journey with this character, first of all, of Timmons, who takes him there, and you know, he comes into contact, of course, over the main course of the film, the different tribes, the Sioux tribes, and of course the Pawnee tribes, and you know, basically what happens after that is some of the most beautiful and human stuff I've ever seen in cinema. Basically, the main thing is the themes are communication, you know, finding one's self, of course, and you know, just acceptance, really, you know, and just you know, accepting everyone, basically, and what this film does is something else, you know, in every way. You know, Kevin Costner, of course, he stars in the film as well as Lieutenant John Dunbar, and what a performance! You know, this is a magnum opus, and his performance is stunning. And of course, he directs the film, and he directs it with such passion, sincerity, and heart. You know, and patience. That's what this film requires, of course. That's what epics require. You know, you can't have an epic that is, and I absolutely love epics. They're my favourite. You know, kind of. You could say it's not really too much of a genre in the sense that epics usually to me means big films. You know, of length that, you know, cover quite a long, you know, period of time, or just, you know, a lot of ground. And the term epic, of course, is loosely thrown around quite a lot. But you know, some of my favourite epics, of course, Lord of the Rings, Gone with the Wind, this, of course, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, The Deer Hunter, and then, you know, the Godfather films. Films like this really are very hard to top, and when a film is epic in length as well, it's kind of just bonus for me, you know. And this one, you know, it does everything right, you know, and more. What is required of an epic, you know, of course, the sweep and, you know, the feeling and the kind of, you know, the ground it covers, the scope, but it has to be personal. It has to have characters you care for. It has to have, you know, a narrative that is, you know, compelling. And this is on another level. You know, I think, you know, this is, for me, it's not just the best film of the 1990s, but it's the best film of the 90s. Full stop. And, you know, before this, you know, it's better than all the films that came before this. Going back to 1975, there's a hint for what I think, you know, a film that is better than this. And you know, there's only a couple films that top this really for me ever put to screen. I think, you know, the opening 15 minutes is stunning. You know, straight away drawn in, and you've got this wonderful feel. You know, it's full of heart. You know, it's a very warm film. When I say warm, you know, it is off the charts. You know, what this film makes me feel. I can't describe fully. But you know, Kevin Costner, I just love Kevin Costner. You know, and his personality in real life and stuff. And I just, you know, what he's done here with Dancing with Wolves has always been life changing to me. And you know, just such a sincerity, the way he approaches the film, the characters, the love of the land, all this sort of stuff, the themes. You know, and of course Native Americans, and the way it portrays them is with such dignity, sincerity, and you know, it's just stunning. And I think this is one of the best directed films ever. You know, we're straight away drawn in, and then of course, once you know that 15 minutes is over, the 16 minutes, it becomes Dance with Wolves really, as I always think of it. It really just goes beyond what you know you think could, for me anyway, could be what a film could be, and you know, it just turns into one of the most majestic, moving, overwhelming films, full of wonder. You know, that's one of the things about this film, the wonder throughout. You know, of the landscape. You know, and the John Barry score is something else. It is unbelievable. You know, for me, the second or third best film score of all time. It's that good. I think it's better than any of the Bond music he ever done, which is saying a lot. This is better, you know, Out of Africa as well. That's really wonderful music. But this is by far his best. You know, all the kind of percussion and everything that is always prevalent in a lot of his work is amped up here to the max, and it just is full of emotion. So full of emotion. You know, it kind of reminds me of Gone with the Wind score, and you know, just the way it's used throughout the film. This perfection, cinematic perfection. It adds so much to the film, and it's in tune so much with what is happening with the characters. You know, the landscape and the kind of just the way it portrays the tribes and everything, and it's just epic. It's moving, it's beautiful, and it's just overwhelming in every sense. The score is wonderful. It's probably my second favourite score of all time. Absolutely wonderful, and you know, once you start this this journey, it is epic. You know, it really is. The adventure feel to the film, you know, especially at first when you know he's travelling and you know to Fort Sedgwick, and you know music kicks in, and it's just epic. You know, it's so good, and the way it just has this adventure feel, and of course with Timmons it has a lot of comedy there, with the character. You know, at first when he's in it, and you know some beautiful moments as well, of course. You know, where he's looking at the shooting stars and everything, and the journal really plays a key, you know, part in this film. It's a way, of course, of us, you know, when he's on his own throughout the film, Kevin Costner, you know, John Dunbar, we kind of see his thought, you know, we're aware of his thoughts and everything. It just makes it more personal that he's writing his thoughts in this journal, and the way the journal actually is a character really in its own, or it kind of just the way it's really really meaningful. The way that you know he writes all his thoughts in there, and it's treated as really one of the characters, kind of really, you know, a character of importance, and you know, this is just so spiritual. This film, it's very hard to describe and talk about, you know, and probably this review will not even do it, you know, enough justice. You just have to watch the film, but you know, the journal, the way it's portrayed is wonderful, and gradually, you know, over the film, and certainly, you know, after the 45-minute mark, we see these tribe members of the Sioux tribe, and basically, you know, Graham Greene, his character of Kicking Bird, basically is the leader of this tribe, and you know, it's about them communicating, and kind of becoming friends with Kevin Costner's character, and it's just wonderful. You know, the way it deals with acceptance, and communication. It's something that really, you think of films that deal with this, E.T., and this is just even further than that, I feel, the way it does it. It's just wonderful. You know, all the joys, all the wonder, and the frustrations of communicating with people that you at first can't understand. It's so well done, and that really is one of the drives of the film. I was excited, I was anticipating the more and more, they came into it, them communicating and eventually becoming friends. And that's because, one of the things is delayed gratification that Costner tries to, portray here. The way that it's just it's teased and it keeps getting, teased and then eventually unfolds and it just progresses in the way they communicate. And eventually, of course, they become absolute, great friends, all the tribe members, with Kevin Costner, and it becomes, he comes into the group, he gets kind of, welcomed in, and of course he develops this romance with the character of Stands with a Fist, and played by Maury McDonnell, and one of the best romances in cinema, full stop for me. It's beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. So uplifting, beautiful, and just so powerful. It's got so much emotion, and again, the patience, the way he takes his time with developing this romance, just makes it more meaningful, and it's very, very realistic in the way that it progress. Is introduced in the way it doesn't quite come about at first, and then it's just even more meaningful. And the scenes that the romance scenes are just wonderful. They're some of the most beautiful and pure scenes in cinema. And of course, this character of John Dunbar just becomes one of the group, and really overall the character development in this film is some of the best in cinema. I think the writing is wonderful, but the way that the tribes are portrayed. The characters within the tribe are portrayed, and the way that the interaction plays out in the film is what makes it so meaningful and so wonderful. It's wonderful to watch them kind of interacting and getting to know each other, and it just adds such a layer. The fact that they can't quite at first communicate. He uses comedy masterfully to kind of make it more grounded, make it more enjoyable, the actual communication, and I just think this couldn't have been done any better. And the cinematography is, as well, is on another level. A bit reminiscent at times to Gone with the Wind, The Searchers as well, I would say, and it's kind of similar at times to Unforgiven, which would of course come later. This film really revived. For a time as well, the Western genre again, and really now as well. Really since 1990, it's been a couple of years, but there's not been too many great ones. But really, the Western genre is kind of back, and actually now with Django Unchained and Hateful Eight and stuff, it is really back. And it fizzled out a bit, for a couple of decades really. There was a couple here and there that came about that were of worth, but as well, Heaven's Gate, of course, what happened there, that really affected things. But this one brought it back, and it actually gets hated on more than at times Heaven's Gate, and it's just a shame with this film. The fact that how much what I think of this film, it's very. First of all, it's actually quite unbelievable that it's got as high a score as it has on IMDb, but then as well the fact based on how good the film is for me, I would have thought it would be in the top 250, but it's not quite. But generally, thinking around about what happened at the Oscars and everything, I would have thought this would have been a lot lower. But there it goes. Maybe over time it might come back in estimations. But I think this is just something else. As well, the editing, and the framing as well, and the way that the shot flow is something else. This is a sweeping film for sure. And it's even more so times than Gone with the Wind. And just the way that he moves the camera, it's just wonderful. Just got this graceful feel, and the way he captures as well the seasons. I love, very distinct, and just gives the film so much feeling. The way that the nature is captured, and it reminds me a lot of Days of Heaven. Actually, this, and the cinematography is pretty much on the level to Days of Heaven. I think, it just it is very much like that in the way that the nature is portrayed, and quite a lot of the film is at sunset and stuff. It's just beautiful, as I say, this for me is the best film I've reviewed on this channel, and the performances, they are stunning. Maury McDonnell Of course, very very hard. You know, a very hard role to play. You know, but it's pulled off perfectly, and it's so convincing. You know, her struggles, is particular her struggles to actually speak to Kevin Costner's character. It's so believable that it's just it's just so good. Greene, you know, I'd understand if people call him the star of the show. He is wonderful in this film. Rodney Grant as well, absolutely wonderful. And all these characters, you know, it's just such a warm film, so peaceful, so spiritual, and it's just a joy. And you know, it's very, very moving. There's some very graphic stuff. You know, the way he portrays the violence is, you know, just true. You know, honest and sincere. The way he portrays the violence, and you know, of course, things happen to some of the characters, and it's just so moving when it does, because you just become part of this tribe, even, you know, through the interactions of the main characters, and the way that, you know, you're kind of, at first Kevin Costner's on his own for most of the film, for most of the first sort of 45 minutes of the film, and when he joins into the tribe, you're behind him, and as well you're kind of greeted with these warm, you know, loving characters, and you know, it's just so wonderful. You know, I think Graham Greene in particular, you know, the Kicking Bird character, it's just one of my favourite characters in cinema. Easily, you know, just wonderful. And it's just the relationships, the friendships is just some of the most pure stuff I've ever seen in cinema. It's that's what it is. This film is pure. You know, pure emotions. Visually, it is on another level. Wonderful script. You know, Michael Blake, you know, worked with Costner, of course. The script is so good. You know, there's so many lines that are just so meaningful and reflect on life. And the way that Kevin Costner, just in general, his character, John Dunbar, integrates into into the group and basically finds himself all over, is so uplifting and spiritual. You know, just undescribable, really. And you know, of course, the action scenes when they are there, some of the finest I've ever seen. The way they're edited, and you know, just the way that you know, the stakes when, you know, when the action scenes, you know, the battles do happen. The stakes are so high. I cared about every single character. Just makes you value all the characters' lives, and you know, the relationships and how it progresses. You know, there is not a single flaw with this film for me. I do not, and I never will, understand how this film gets the hate. You know, it does, and I just really, you know, it baffles me. You know, with the Oscar stuff, I just don't get it, and just, you know, how can this film be hated on? I just don't get it. You know, fine, of course, if you don't like the film, but you know, for me, it's one of the 10 finest, and you know, as I've said, it's in my top 4 films of all time. You know, that's probably going to be probably going to be the best film that I review for actually quite a while, maybe. You know, there's only really one or two films I think, you know, I prefer to this, of the century, and maybe not even that. And you know, really, as it is, it's going to remain in my top 10, you know, forever. You know, I think it's a one of a kind magnum opus. I feel as well, you know, just the romance is so pure. It's like City Lights, you know, it's just pure emotions. Wonderful, sincere, magical. This film is magical, you know, for its visuals, for its music, just the adventure feel, the scope of it. Just the way, you know, the humble, kind of sincere beginnings. The way it expands, though. As the film expands, it becomes more personal, and that's key. You know, the details in this film is what's key as well. You know, Costner just he gives you these little details that just make the world more immersive, and believable. You know, and of course shot in Wyoming, South Dakota as well. Yeah, just wonderful. The locations, so it's some of the most beautiful scenery. You know, and Wyoming is just a wonderful place. And you know, just the visuals in this film and the landscape and everything, the way it's captured is magical. You know, it has this feeling, overwhelming feeling, but then it becomes more and more personal and character driven as the film goes on, and that's how you do an epic. Balancing out these characters that are sometimes overwhelmed by the world around them, but they have these kind of this gripping and compelling set of relationships, and all the details, and the journal is one of them details that really makes the film even more richer of an experience. This really, I cannot praise it higher. It's one of the finest films that I've ever seen. The Blu-ray is really wonderful as well. This is the theatrical version. I think I have seen both, and I do prefer that one because, I think it is just more of a purer and more a film with more flow and more just maintains the sense of wonder and purity throughout, maybe. But I haven't seen the other one, of course, in a while. But yeah, I'll definitely check that out at some point again. But this film is full of emotion. What it makes me feel. Yes, it makes me cry. Every time, and it's just like a film, like The Deer Hunter, or Days of Heaven, where it's just welling up the whole film really. It's just packed. Every frame is packed full of emotion. And just Kevin Costner's approach, the patience he has of bringing these characters out and the relationships and what he says about Native Americans and the nation and everything. It's so sincere and just wonderful film. Of course, this gets my highest rating. It is beyond perfection. It's the finest film I've reviewed on my channel, and of course, it gets 100% plus. Tier S, the greatest Western of all time, the greatest from the 90s. Kevin Costner, thank you. Changed my life, and it's just a wonderful film. It's so spiritual. It's one of them films that just touches the soul. The heart, the mind, and the soul. And one of them films that I could kind of feel happy spending my last time, kind of days watching. And just feel complete. It's one of them films that makes me feel so much, so uplifting, so moving. And as well the kind of even the little relationships between John Dunbar and his horse Cisco. It's so meaningful. And Two Socks, the wolf that he meets, is so wonderful. And it's just all these things contribute to this spiritual feel. Kind of reflection on life, the value of humanity, humans, and the sense of humanity throughout this film is on another level. And it just really is easily leaps and bounds beyond most films I've ever seen. And rightfully so, it won the Oscars that it got, 7 Oscars. The Academy, yes, is often wrong, but I never really get angry. It's just a case that it is, other films usually are more deserving than what gets the best picture, for example. On this occasion, no, rightfully so. I do think it's better than Goodfellas. Of course, I didn't want to talk about it too much. But yes, it's beyond anything Scorsese's ever done. For me, it's beyond what most directors have ever done, and this was his directorial debut. I haven't seen The Postman or Open Range, but I want to check them out soon. But Dancing with Wolves, cannot recommend this highly enough. When I did my favourite films list, when I eventually do that, probably next year, this is going to be a top 10 forever, and this will be very, very high. As I say, it's probably my top 4 at the moment. And it just goes beyond what I've seen pretty much ever in cinema. As well, every act just gets better and better. The way the characters develop, you would never think, the way this film starts, you would not be able to anticipate what this does, and how much ground it covers, and these relationships, the romance is one of the purest I've ever seen, and just all the characters in this film are wonderful, and yes, it's just I cannot praise this film, as I've said, more than this. If you've not seen it, check it out and discuss in the comments. Of course, be respectful because yes, you just be respectful, please, in the comments. But yes, this film for me, it means so much to me. And, I guess it's, of course, changed many people's lives. And yeah, just hopefully more and more people see it over the years and just see its beauty and its wonder. Um, it inspires more awe in me than 2001, The Space Odyssey, Lawrence of Arabia, films like that. It's that good. And Kevin Costner, just master, and everyone involved bring everything to the film. The ending's one of the finest and most emotional in cinema. Very complex. The whole film is complex. It's not just this sappy film that a lot of people say it is. It's so meaningful and so powerful. Dance with Wolves, one of the 10 best films ever made, and very, very high, of course. Almost my favourite film of all time. It's that good. So yes, thanks for watching my review of Dancing with Wolves. And yeah, not a lot of people, of course, will agree with me saying that this is one of the best. But yeah, I really agree with what the Oscars, the Academy on that occasion, and it was in the top 100 AFI at one point. I don't think it's any more on the recent one. But yeah, this film means so much to me. It really is one of the films that made me want to become a filmmaker. And yes, it's Dancing with Wolves and it's cinematic perfection. It's a magnum opus, and yeah. Thanks for watching my review.